My name is Maya Dalton. The day my father died, the world didn't stop the way I thought it would. I remember sitting on the front porch steps, barefoot, clutching a mug of coffee I couldn't taste, staring at a sky that felt too blue for death. It should have rained. It should have thundered or cried. But it didn't. It just stayed quiet, like something sacred had slipped away without making a sound. I thought grief would be loud screaming, sobbing, the tearing of clothes like in the old stories. But instead, it came like a fog, heavy, slow, unrelenting. It clung to me in the strangest moments, like when I reached for the phone to call him about some silly news, or when I found his old leather jacket in the hallway and caught the ghost of his cologne. What I didn't expect, not for a second, was how fast the people around me would shift. Or maybe they were always that way, and grief just made me see them clearer. Fiona, my stepsister, wore black like it was a costume. Her tears looked perfect, like someone had painted them onto her cheeks. She hugged me at the funeral, but I could feel the distance in her arms, like she was performing for someone else, not comforting me. Not really. Fiona always had a way of making things about her. The perfect daughter, the golden child. Even when we were kids, she would rewrite our shared stories to make herself the heroine and me the forgotten side character. But I thought maybe losing him would level the ground between us. I thought maybe, just maybe, we could grieve together. I was wrong. She called the lawyer without telling me, arranged a reading like I didn't even exist, said I was too emotionally unstable to handle it, that I wouldn't want to be there anyway. She whispered to the cousins that I'd been distant from Dad for years, that I probably stayed away from guilt. And the worst part, they believed her. I felt it. The shift. The way people looked at me like I was selfish, like I'd abandoned him. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know what happened 2 months before he died. And neither did Fiona.it was a gray afternoon when he showed up at my apartment. No warning. No call. Just a knock on the door, and there he was, standing in the hallway with a paper bag of pastries from the bakery I loved as a child. My first thought was that something was wrong, not with his health. Not yet, but with him. He looked haunted, as if something inside him had been unraveling quietly for a long time. We sat at the kitchen table in silence for a while. I poured tea and he kept glancing at the chipped edge of his mug, like he didn't know how to start. Eventually, he said, "I don't want to leave this world with you thinking I didn't care." I didn't answer right away. There were so many things I could have said. The birthdays missed, the way he let Fiona's mother slowly erase me from the house I grew up in, how I had learned to be small in every room we shared. But I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence is the only language grief understands. He told me he had made changes, that he'd seen things more clearly lately, that regrets had a way of clawing at you in the middle of the night. And then he said that he'd updated his will, that the lawyer handling it wasn't the one Fiona always paraded around. He gave me a name, an address, and placed a single folded piece of paper in my hand, a copy of the new instructions. Not the will itself, just the proof that it existed. "I should have done right by you a long time ago," he said, voice hoarse. "I'm not trying to fix everything now, just trying to give you what you deserve." It wasn't about the lake house or the money. It was the fact that, for the first time in years, he saw me. He remembered I was still his daughter. When he hugged me goodbye that day, he held on just a second longer than usual. I didn't know it would be the last time. If I had, I think I would have said more. But maybe some truths are meant to unfold slowly, like rain before thunder. After the funeral, things moved quickly, too quickly. Fiona started handling everything like she had some divine right to take control. She told people she was just taking the burden off everyone's shoulders. But what she really meant was, "I'm in charge now." And the family, still wrapped in grief and unsure how to navigate the chaos, let her. I didn't hear anything from the lawyer. Not even a courtesy call. No invitation to the reading. No mention of a date. For a while, I thought maybe the grief had swallowed me whole and I had missed something. Maybe there had been a message I hadn't answered or a detail I had misunderstood. But when I called Fiona, not angrily, not accusingly, just gently asking about arrangements, she acted surprised. "Oh," she said, her voice syrupy and tight. "I thought you didn't want to come." I told the lawyer you'd probably be too upset. It stunned me into silence. She said it like she was doing me a favor, as if deciding for me was kindness. I could almost hear the smile in her voice, that smug little edge she always tried to hide under a polished tone. But don't worry, she added. There wasn't anything left to you anyway. It was mostly just finalizing the formalities. That was the moment the grief inside me shifted into something colder. Not anger. Not yet, but a kind of clarity. I knew what she was doing. Fiona had always wanted to be the sole heir to Dad's legacy. She wore her ambition like perfume, thick and noticeable. And now she saw her chance to rewrite the ending of his story, without me in it. She didn't know what I knew. I didn't tell her about the meeting Dad and I had. I didn't mention the name of the lawyer he trusted, the real one, or the sealed envelope sitting quietly in my dresser drawer. She thought she had erased me, that my name had been scribbled out of every document, every memory, every claim. But I was still here. I was watching. And I was waiting, because the thing about being underestimated is, no one sees you coming. They started whispering at the repast. Just small things at first, little barbed comments passed around like whores. Dervs. I overheard Aunt Margie say she hoped I was finally making peace with my absence. My cousin Jonah avoided my eyes altogether. And someone I don't even know who asked me if it was true I hadn't even been in touch with Dad for the last few years. I felt my body go cold. It was like standing in a room full of people who remembered a version of my life that never existed. A version someone else had carefully constructed and handed to them, framed with her polished grief and perfectly folded lies. Fiona, she had done more than exclude me from the will reading. She had begun a quiet war, not with fists or shouting, but with poisoned words spoken behind cupped hands. She told them I had grown distant, that I hadn't visited Dad in months, that he died still waiting for a call from me that never came. And worst of all, she said it with such conviction, such sincere eyes, that they believed her. It's strange how quickly people want to believe the worst when it comes wrapped in calm tones and a confident voice. What they didn't know was how many times I had called and how often she had intercepted those messages. What they didn't know was that Dad and I had started finding our way back to each other, slowly, gently, in the last year of his life. They didn't know about our Sunday coffee dates, or how he always asked me about my garden, even though he knew nothing about plants. She erased all of that with a few carefully curated conversations. She made sure they only remembered the distance, not the bridge we'd been building. That's the cruelty of betrayal. It doesn't just break trust. It rewrites the past in someone else's handwriting. But I didn't fight back. Not yet. There's something to be said about restraint, about letting people show you who they are without interruption. I listened. I watched. I let them say what they needed to say, let them believe the version of the story Fiona handed them, because I had something she didn't. The truth. And the truth is patient. The night before the real reading, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed with the envelope in my hands, the one Dad had given me weeks before he passed. It was heavier than it should have been, not in weight, but in meaning. Inside was a copy of the updated will, and a business card with the name of the attorney who now held the original, notarized and sealed. I traced the edge of the envelope with my thumb, over and over, like I was trying to memorize it through touch. I could hear Fiona's voice in my head, calm, dismissive, cruel. There wasn't anything left to you anyway. She thought she had buried me along with him, that if she just moved quickly and smiled often enough, no one would question it. No one would wonder why his daughter, his only child by blood, had been left out entirely. And for a while, they didn't, because Fiona was good at pretending. But I knew the truth. I had lived it. I had watched her tighten her grip on him in those final years, nudging him gently but persistently toward her vision of the perfect family, the one where I didn't exist. She was careful, calculated. She didn't tell him not to see me outright. She just made it uncomfortable every time he did. And yet, despite all that, he still came to me. He still sat at my kitchen table and said he was sorry. That mattered. Maybe not to them, but to me. In the morning, I dressed simply. No drama, no flair. I didn't need to prove anything. I slipped the envelope into my bag and headed downtown. To the office where the family's longtime attorney, Mr. Whitaker, waited. Fiona was already there when I arrived. She wore grief like an accessory, tasteful, expensive, coordinated. She didn't see me. Not at first. I stayed just outside the reading room, close enough to hear, far enough to remain invisible. She read from her version. Calm, confident, lies dressed up as legacy. And I waited, because I knew that once I stepped into that room, the story she had written would start to burn. And all I had to do was hand over a single piece of paper to light the match. When I finally stepped into the room, the air shifted. Not dramatically, no gasps, no dropped glasses, no cinematic shock. Just a pause. The kind that ripples under the surface when something unspoken suddenly becomes visible. Fiona's voice faltered mid-sentence. She turned toward me, her expression a perfect mask of polite confusion. Not anger, not guilt, just surprise, like she couldn't believe I had the nerve to show up, like she had already deleted me from this part of the story. And now I was ruining the scene. Oh, she said lightly, as if we were strangers meeting at a cafe. I didn't realize you were coming. I'm sure you didn't, I replied, my voice even. I walked past her and over to Mr. Whitaker, who looked up from his papers with tired eyes, the kind of tired that came from years of family politics and veiled threats dressed as polite requests. When he saw what I handed him, the sealed letter, the attorney card, the copy of the will, something in his posture straightened. He didn't say anything right away. He read carefully, flipping each page like it might bite. Then he turned to the envelope Fiona had given him earlier. He looked at the signature on hers, then mine, compared the seals, the dates, and when he finally spoke, the room, that bright, cold conference room with its glass table and untouched water pitchers, held its breath. This, he said, tapping the copy I brought, is the most recent, legally binding version of Mr. Dalton's will. Fiona laughed. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp. That's not possible, she said. Dad and I went over everything together. He told me. Mr. Whitaker cut her off gently, but firmly. This version was signed 2 months before his passing, with full mental clarity. It overrides any previous drafts. Her smile cracked just slightly. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching her face drain of certainty was enough. The control she had clutched so tightly was slipping, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes, not because of the money, not even the house, but because she realized her version of the story was no longer the only one in the room. Mine had just begun. It was strangely quiet, even after Mr. Whitaker's announcement. No shouting, no confrontation, just the sound of shifting in chairs, the soft creak of leather and linen as relatives leaned in, suddenly unsure of what to believe. Fiona didn't say anything for a long time. She stared at the papers like she could will them into changing, like the date, the seal, the signature weren't real if she refused to acknowledge them, but they were. Every word, every clause, every line was exactly what Dad had told me it would be. Mr. Whitaker began reading the updated will aloud. His voice was slow, steady, like he was peeling back each layer of my father's final truth. The lake house went to me. The business shares, the same ones Fiona had been boasting about in hushed, wine-soaked conversations, were left entirely in my name. The vintage Mustang, Dad's pride and joy, the one Fiona had already moved into her garage, mine too. I watched her face as it all unfolded. At first, disbelief, then something colder. I recognized it. That flicker of entitlement, giving way to panic. She had spent weeks constructing her lie, painting me as the absent daughter, the emotional liability, the unworthy one. She had fed those stories to everyone with the precision of someone who had rehearsed them in the mirror, and they'd eaten it up. Because Fiona was shiny, she knew how to smile with her whole face, how to sound warm even when she was setting the ground on fire beneath you. But now the ground was crumbling under her feet. The rest of the family didn't know what to do. You could feel them recalibrating in real time. The whispers, the side glances, the looks that said maybe we were wrong. No one apologized, not out loud, but the silence that followed was its own kind of confession. Fiona tried to hold on to her composure, but I saw her jaw tighten. She stood abruptly, muttering something about needing air, and left the room. Not a dramatic exit, just a quiet retreat. I didn't follow her. I stayed seated. My hands were still. My heart was calm. I didn't need to chase her anymore. The truth had already caught up. After the room cleared, I sat alone with Mr. Whitaker. The finality of it hadn't quite sunk in yet. There was no applause, no satisfying swell of music like in the movies, just a thick quiet that settled in my chest. Equal parts relief and sorrow. He slid the original will back into its folder and looked at me with something almost like pride, but gentler. He wanted to make it right, he said. He wasn't perfect, but he wanted you to know he saw you. I nodded. My throat ached, but I didn't cry. Not then. I had cried so much already in the car, in my kitchen, into the folds of my coat when I thought no one could hear. There was something different about this moment. This wasn't grief. This was reclamation. This was the quiet echo of justice finally finding its voice. The lake house was the first place I visited. I hadn't been there in years, not since. I was pushed out of it by cold shoulders and carefully locked doors. I remembered running down the dock barefoot as a child, Dad calling after me with mock frustration and real affection. I remembered the swing under the maple tree that Fiona had claimed as hers, even though Dad built it for me. When I walked through the front door, my breath caught in my throat. Everything was exactly the same, and yet nothing was. Fiona hadn't changed a thing, she'd just occupied it like a squatter with a better dress. Her perfume still lingered in the hallway. Her favorite wine glasses were lined up on the kitchen counter like trophies. But now, it was mine. Not just a deed, not just a legal language. The space, the memories, the roots. She had tried to sever me from them, but my father had planted me too deeply. There was no triumph in this. Not the kind people think of. No smugness, no vengeance. Just a slow, steady breath after years of holding it in. I walked to the living room, opened the cabinet under the stairs, and found the old photo albums. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages. There I was, still part of this story. Still here. The days that followed were quiet, but not empty. I didn't hear from Fiona, not directly. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up at my door, and honestly, I was grateful for the silence. She wasn't the kind to apologize. Her pride wouldn't allow it. And what would she even say? That she hadn't meant to erase me? That she just wanted to be the center of everything, like always? I don't think people like Fiona ever believe they're wrong. They believe they deserve everything they take and that anyone who resists them is simply being difficult. In her mind, I had never really been Dad's daughter the way she had. She'd told that story to herself so many times that by the end, she probably believed it. But stories can't outrun facts forever. And when they catch up, the fall is brutal. Word spread fast. I didn't need to say anything, I didn't need to defend myself or correct the record. People began putting the pieces together on their own. Some called me, some didn't. I could feel the shift though. The awkward apologies, the backpedaling, the quiet shame in the way old friends suddenly remembered how close Dad and I used to be. But forgiveness doesn't always need to be loud. Sometimes, it's just choosing not to carry their guilt on your shoulders anymore. I went back to the lake house every day that week. Each visit, I opened another drawer she had once claimed, touched another object she thought belonged to her. I didn't do it to gloat. I did it because I needed to make space for myself, for my memories, for truth. The Mustang was still in her garage. It would take a legal nudge to get it back, but I didn't rush it. Let her look at it one last time and remember that she couldn't keep it. No matter how many stories she spun, she had tried to erase me, not just from the will, from Dad's legacy, from the family, from the truth, but he wouldn't let her. In the end, the man who had failed me in life found a way to defend me in death, and that matters. Because love, even when late, can still be enough. Some nights I still dream of him, not the sick version, not the pale and tired man from the hospital, but the father I remembered from when I was small. The one who lifted me onto his shoulders during summer carnivals. The one who made pancakes too thin but still called them Dalton style. He's always younger in those dreams, smiling in that warm, distracted way, like the world wasn't heavy yet. I wake up sometimes with tears on my cheeks. Not from sadness, not exactly. It's something softer now, something like release. The truth is, I'll never have the relationship with him I used to wish for. There are years we can't get back, words we didn't say when we should have. But what he gave me at the end wasn't just property or a car or a final gesture in a lawyer's office. He gave me a chance to stand up, to be seen, to be written back into the story someone else tried to delete me from. And I took it. I moved into the lake house a few weeks after the dust settled. Not forever, just long enough to feel what it meant to belong again. I painted the front room. I replaced Fiona's wine glasses with old chipped mugs like the ones Dad used to drink from. I found a photo of us, from when I was 8, tucked behind a drawer. I framed it. Sometimes people stop by. Neighbors, distant cousins. They come with tentative smiles and cautious voices, unsure of where we stand. I don't hold on to bitterness. Not anymore. I just tell them the truth. Not the polished one. Not the one Fiona sold them, just a simple, imperfect truth. My name is Maya Dalton. I lost my father. I grieved him. I forgave him. And I survived the betrayal that came wrapped in mourning. Not with fury. Not with revenge. But with grace, the kind you have to grow inside yourself when the world refuses to give it to you. This wasn't just about a will. It was about being remembered. It was about not letting someone rewrite my place in the world. And in the end, Dad made sure I had the last word, and I made sure it was mine.